We have made a promise to you that we would introduce you to some candidates that we think are pretty good. We will introduce ourselves to candidates that we think that we have heard are pretty good. You can decide from there. We also make a promise to each candidate that if you turn out to be a dirtbag, we turn on you so fast and so hard that your head will spin. Matt Bevin almost got a little bit of that this week when Politico put a smear piece out, a total hit piece out on Matt Bevin. And we saw it before we went on the air, and I said, get Matt Bevin on the phone. I want to know what his answer is on this one. And knocked it out of the park, and we have all of the evidence that what he said on this broadcast, what was it, yesterday, is true. Mm-hmm. You can read about it at the Blaze. It was a total smear job. The left and the progressive right is coming out and smearing anybody with small government principles. Katrina Pierson is running against Congressman Pete Sessions here in Texas, District 32. To call Pete a massive disappointment is a massive understatement. Katrina, you should get to know. Ted Cruz, who doesn't throw these things around lightly, called her an utterly fearless, principled conservative, which I think is about the highest praise you could get from Ted Cruz. And she is in the studio with us now, Katrina Pierson. Hi, Katrina. How are you?
Hi, Glenn. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Okay, so why are you running and getting into? Why would you do this?
Well, that's a great question. Working in the grassroots over the last 5 years in Texas and across this nation, we have a desperate need for people to stand up and fight back against the establishment. Hardly anyone ever gets challenged, and that is the biggest problem we have. And since this window of opportunity is quickly closing, I found myself in a position to where it should be done. Pete Sessions, I used to be a fan myself. A lot of people supporting my campaign today used to be Sessions supporters. And unfortunately, the last 5 years, he has, to say the least, gone the other direction. He is now promoting John Boehner to us instead of representing us to John Boehner. And given my experience in healthcare, I think that's going to be critical moving forward. It is going to be a topic for at least the next 10 years. So I feel like I'm just better qualified for the position and a real conservative.
So tell me the things that he has done that you would like to correct.
Well, there is a list, but I will start with spending. In 2010, Mr. Sessions said that they were going to give the American public 72 hours to read the bill before they voted on it. They said they were going to cut spending and fight back against Obamacare. And in fact, they failed on all three fronts. Just a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Sessions championed voting for the additional $1.1 trillion omnibus bill, which is something that Reagan himself said he would veto. And he voted with every Democrat in the state. District 32 is a very conservative district in Texas, and that's just unacceptable. That's definitely not representing the people in our district. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, some of the other things, like the Farm Bill, many of the conservative groups across the country were completely against this additional spending and permanent subsidies, which go against conservative principles, and he was a champion of that as well. He voted over the summer to give the president more power to appoint without congressional oversight. I don't think conservatives want this president to have more power than he already has, considering he's taking his pen and his phone to circumvent Congress altogether. And then we have all the debt ceiling hikes, which surprisingly he didn't vote for this last one. But that's a real problem for conservatives in Texas. And the fact that they failed to take the fight to the American public in 2010 for Obamacare and getting rid of it, they waited on Ted Cruz in 2012 to bring that fight to us, which ultimately led to the government shutdown. He used his authority, Glenn, as Rules Committee chairman to block the defund effort in March last year. And he admitted it. It's on the norepeat.com website, and that is unacceptable for leadership in this country today.
So what do you think? What happened to him when he got up there, do you suppose? What happened? What happens to all of those people? I'm not saying Pete himself. What happens to those people when they go up?
Well, 2 decades without any checks and balances, without a primary challenger, I think it's just easy to fall into that trap. There's no one holding him accountable at that point. This is the first viable challenge he's had since he's been elected. And we've already seen some significant turnaround in his habits in D.C. already. So I think that's ultimately what happens. And primaries are good for this reason, so that we can either replace somebody who needs to be replaced or at least let them know we're paying attention.
So tell me about who you are. You mentioned the grassroots. Tell me your history.
Well, I did. I came out of the grassroots. I have an interesting story, and people always ask me how I became so conservative considering where I came from. And the simple answer is I just lived it. My mother was 14 years old when she was pregnant with me. My grandfather said abortion was not an option. But she had a biracial baby and they didn't know what to do. Gladney said they didn't specialize in biracial babies. So my mother was sent to Kansas to give birth to me and give me up for adoption. She changed her mind and brought me back to Texas. So the ongoing, joke on the campaign is I'm a native Texan born in Kansas. But I also grew up with a teenage mom who became very much codependent on government and then became very much codependent on drugs. And that's what happens with these liberal policies. It traps you in an environment that you can't get out of. And then it finally breaks your spirit. And the rest of us caught up in that environment have to fight tooth and nail to get out of it. And I survived that. And so I feel like it's my duty to fight back against that because it's becoming the standard. This administration feels like the redistribution of wealth should be the standard in this society, and I cannot allow that.
So Keith Ellison said this week that we're losing jobs, and that's a good thing because it'll allow people to spend more time. Parents will be able to cook dinner instead of going out or having takeout, and people will be able to follow their passion without the worry of a job. That's a serious quote. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think it's very disturbing. A lot of people ask me, how did I become so conservative? And when you ask a black Republican for their perspective, you'd better be prepared for the answer. And, when I was growing up as a teenager, I had heard Malcolm X, of all people. And if you listen to Malcolm X and compare it to what Barack Obama says, you'd be deeply surprised at the differences. Malcolm X said, you get a job so you don't have to depend on anybody else. You get an education so you can take care of your family, and you stick close to your religion, and you get your guns and you own them. It's your constitutional right. And if you believe that the United States is the greatest country in the world, we don't need new laws. That's what I grew up hearing. So to hear the community today preach just the opposite, it makes you wonder what happened.
So who do you think Martin Luther King was? Because, we were sold Martin Luther King as this great guy who believed in civil rights and was a preacher and a God-fearing man, and he just wanted an equal chance. And that's not what they're saying who he is now. Now the left is saying that he was a communist and he wanted redistribution of wealth and he wanted guaranteed, incomes and guaranteed jobs. And that's not the Malcolm X or the Martin Luther King I know or was sold.
Right.
So which one was he?
Well, in today's politics, perception is reality, just like anything else. And we really just need to look at the facts and listen to those speeches again. And, something interesting that I talk about a lot that helps other minorities that I talk to is to listen to some of these speeches back then. Malcolm X, the ballot or the bullet, was a very interesting speech given not too long before he was killed that talked about what would happen if the black community put their entire vote behind a political party, talked about how the white liberals were going to push progressive policies and ideology on the country that would trap them. And I look back at that and just say, wow, no wonder they're pushing Martin Luther King, because he was sort of the moderate during the civil rights movement, and he was just wanting peace and can we all just get along? And but there's got to be fighters out there, and people follow courage, and we just need to look at the facts and stop letting them redefine essentially everything at this point.
Now, we're talking to Katrina Pierson, who's running against Pete Sessions for his congressional seat in the primary. Pete Sessions, on some of these specific issues, Katrina, where do you stand? Pete Sessions voted for TARP. Would you have voted for the bailout?
I would not have voted for the bailout. We shouldn't be voting for any bailouts at all. That's not the federal government's role. No business is too big to fail, especially the federal government.
More recently, he voted against reining in the NSA. Where do you stand on that?
I've been on Fox News for the last 5 years, specifically on that topic. I am definitely a privacy advocate. We have got to rein in the NSA. I mean, they are to the point now to where not only stalking us, but they're stalking our children and storing this information for 76 years. For what? And they say all this that is in the interest of national security, yet our borders remain wide open.
So where do you stand on the borders?
Yeah.
Because the borders are, you have all of the establishment GOP saying we've got to have comprehensive immigration reform. What's your idea?
I say absolutely not. 92 million jobs lost. The economy is in disarray. And the fact that the GOP establishment is propping up what's in the best interest of non-citizens over citizens lets you know the GOP establishment is not only detached, but it's lost their way completely.
So what happens to the GOP? Because the GOP is, I mean, you're running against the establishment now. You are Freedom Works favorite and Tea Party favorite. The GOP is not in love with you or me or anybody else that believes in small government. So what happens to them? What's happening to the GOP?
Well, I think the GOP, is fundamentally dismantling itself. We saw this last year that they are trying to alienate even the remaining of their base based upon special interest. The GOP used to be the party of opportunity, the party of freedom, and now it's shifted the party of corporatism, the party of special interests and lobbyists. And what's interesting is you have the liberals who have this marriage with government, and then you have Republicans who have a marriage with big business. And now you have big business married to government. So they are one big happy family here.
Right.
And so it's up to the people moving forward where the real power is to get out there and get engaged to stop that process.
I will tell you that I was so tired of GOP, just loves big business. And I never really bought into that, until, halfway through Bush's term. I don't have a problem with big business, but I do have a problem with big business having special favors and access. And you got to give they have to be on the exact same playing field as a startup, as an entrepreneur. And that doesn't happen. And I think personally the GOP should be over. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I just don't think that anybody who hasn't, I think Ted Cruz is either the dumbest guy in the Senate ever or the smartest guy in the Senate, because he's putting all of it on the line and saying repeal Obamacare, and he's making huge stands. Yesterday, he stood against the raising of the debt ceiling. Now, I don't know how you're going to get away with that, because I think you have a president and a lot of people in Congress that don't mind this thing coming down so they can blame it on somebody, et cetera, et cetera. How do you possibly, I assume you're against the raising of the debt ceiling?
Absolutely.
How do you think you pull that off politically?
Well, I think you just stop playing politics. And I think that's the best example that Senator Cruz is showing to all of us. At the end of the day, we do know that he has a lot of support from his constituents, because ultimately that's who he is representing. And he's also raised the bar when it comes to governing. There's a lot of people who call us in Texas saying, can you come interview our candidate so we can find our Ted Cruz? And but this is what we have to do now. We are in the end game. When Democrats have power, they play for keeps. When Republicans had power, they moved progressive ideas forward.
That's for sure.
So we have to replace the Republicans. And they say, oh, well, Democrats, they're the problem. No, they're not. We're Republicans. It's our duty. We have the obligation to replace the Republicans who are not representing us or even our party anymore.
Talking like that, how do you win this election, though, when you've got the entire structure of the party bearing down on you?
Well, I mean, this is the fight that we have, and we've shown in Texas that we could do it with Ted Cruz. This is a little bit different because this is a 2-decade incumbent, but we have to fight. We just have to fight. And like our senator says, you lose half the battle, all the battles that you don't fight
Pete
at all.
Sessions is spending a fortune now.
Yes.
On you, and the smear campaigns and everything else have started. How are you holding up?
Well, we knew going in this wasn't going to be easy, and we saw what the establishment did to Senator Cruz, completely distorting any and everything he was ever involved with and trying to assassinate his character. But at the end of the day, as I said, we have to fight. So I'm willing to undergo whatever punches I need to undergo if it means standing up to the establishment.
So here's how, because I know you listen to the show. So here's the question that if you're not prepared for, you're a moron. How's your soul question? Because you're going to go in. I've seen friends. We have had friends. We've lost. Mm-hmm. They go in. They're good. They're strong. But I mean, you have a flaw or an Achilles heel or a desire for something. Oh, it will be exposed, encouraged, or given to you in exchange for your soul. So, how's your soul?
I think my soul is actually the strongest part in what's getting me through all of the smear campaigns and everything. When I helped Senator Cruz, I walked away from my position as an administrator at a level 1 hospital facility. I'm a single mom. That took a huge leap of faith to jump out there and help Senator Cruz get elected, walking away from my livelihood. I fundamentally believe in what's happening in this country. And I also believe that we have a real opportunity to fix this and get these things turned around so that those behind me can come in and get us back on track. And the soul question, I think, is probably the most important one. And I think we do that by finding what motivates us. I'm not motivated by money. I'm not motivated by power. I'm motivated by justice. Not social justice, but the simple fact that, I grew up, I clawed my way out of poverty. And that was the most difficult thing that I've ever had to deal with. I was married, divorced, gone through all kinds of crazy things, got pregnant at 19, and I went through all this before the age of 21. And I've had to do all of this on my own. So I understand what it means to have to work, to be better, to do better, put myself through college. These are opportunities that can only happen in America. I would not have survived in any other country. And the fact that these politicians are putting their own self-interest ahead of everybody else is just completely un-American. So we have to fight to restore that. That's what Ted Cruz is doing. It's not politically appropriate, politically correct. He's doing what's right, and that's what we have to do.
The website is
KatrinaForCongress.com.
Okay, KatrinaForCongress.com. Check out her story, and if you feel, as I have said with everybody, don't listen to me, don't take it from me. We're going to expose you to people that we think have value to be heard, and you decide yourself, but do your own homework. And the races that we are highlighting are important nationally. You may say, oh, well, what is it? No, they matter. They really matter nationally. And getting Pete Sessions out will scare the living daylights. You can get Pete Sessions out and Mitch McConnell. I'm telling you, you begin to fundamentally change the GOP, because you will have to go to a third party. If you can't do it this time, you will have to go to a third party. And nobody wants to do that. So the primary is the time to do it. And Pete has spent every dollar. I mean, they're spending a lot of money. And so I'm sure Katrina could use your help if you feel that that is somebody that you feel comfortable enough to support. I will tell you, hearing Ted Cruz say utterly fearless, principled conservative is a pretty big deal. KatrinaForCongress.com. Thanks, Katrina. We'll
Thank you,
talk
Glenn.
again.